Join us now to discuss the 2024 presidential race and increasing calls for Biden to quit his reelection campaign is Axios co-founder Mike Allen. There was a clinic, 22 minutes of how to ask the question, when are you leaving? Not one immigration question, not one question about anything other than you are too old and you need to leave. And a different poor President Biden had to answer it in 22 different ways when it was all said and done. Was that a probing interview for you, Mike?
Well, Joe, I can tell you the donors that we talked to, lawmakers we talked to, say that how many questions there were, how many answers there were, they weren't sufficient. They were not satisfied with what President Biden had to say. Like, Joe, the sort of stages that we've heard donors and lawmakers go through, they were sort of shocked as they watched that interview. Then they were sad as it soaked in what was really going on with President Biden, who many of them have known back to his days as a senator, a chairman, a vice president. And now they're kind of mad. They feel that he is not acting on the signals he's getting. So, Joe, however bad the public conversation is for President Biden, I can tell you the behind the scenes, it's worse. I didn't think
he was that different in that interview than he has been in any of the interviews for the past year or two. That's why they should be mad at themselves, I think. The one guy who, when he said it, I knew it was true probably, Mike, was when Carville said, "That which can't continue won't." And that's a Herb Stein quote. It's not a Ben Stein quote. Bueller. It's a different guy. This is a Herb Stein quote. But I've always thought that, but watching it play out is painful. It's taken a while. Every day that it takes is a day that they're not talking about the insurrection or the felonies or the end of democracy as we know it. It's all about Joe Biden. And they're not going to let that continue much longer.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. Two things about that. One, for a long time, both Republicans and Democrats have said if this race is about Trump, he loses. If it's about Biden, he has a better chance to win. This race has been all about Biden. The Trump people have just been enjoying the week of coverage of that. And there's another time imperative here, Joe. So just a week from today, the Republican convention starts. The month after that, the Democratic convention starts. And so if Democrats are going to make a change in their nominee, and I can tell you that lots of donors that we talk to, senators, members of the House, expect that will happen. The way one top operative said it to us is every day that goes by is a disaster, that we expect that if it's not President Biden, we expect it would be Vice President Harris, and getting that in place, getting that going will take time. But the White House is playing for time. So they've announced a Thursday news conference at the end of a NATO summit, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday here in D.C. And then for next week, something that's very unusual, Joe, is they've announced the president's schedule 10 days out, which 10 days out, very unusual. The presidents could be in Texas and Nevada during the Republican convention, talking about civil rights, talking about unity in America. So the White House sending every external signal they can, full speed ahead.
Yes. I will say it's just watching it play out, Mike. The first couple of Congress, I guess it was both of them were congressmen, but they were, they are in Congress, but it wasn't like a leading, Nadler's they got now, I guess, but there's Hakeem, Speaker, has seemed relatively, or not Speaker, a minority leader, has seemed sort of open. He hasn't condemned them, nothing from Schumer or Pelosi or any of the real, and then Mark Warner. Right. So it became public. So once it becomes public, he really can't continue to meet with other senators to see what to do. They're that feckless about facing the elephant in the room.
Yeah, Mike, well, the one thing I'll say is you hear people say publicly one thing, they say privately something else.
Very much so. Very much so, Becky. The way that one House Democrat said it to me is the SH will hit the fan today. So the members they were home for the 4th of July recess. So this has all been on text messages. Beginning today, for both the House and the Senate, it's in person. And that will be a very different chemistry, very different dynamic as they talk about their own races. They talk about Democrats hoping to keep the Senate, hoping to flip the House, and Democrats who are worried about the possibility that this is, for the reasons that you guys talked about at the top, giving Trump an edge, giving Trump a better chance. And so that's why things could move very quickly this week. That's why the White House is setting out those tent poles, saying, like, we're engaged, we have this important work to do. But those members who, you're right, all the leaders have been very cautious. So everybody's going to be looking for signals from them in the hours ahead.
For a while, I really thought I could feel it, that, you know, that they were headed that way, and then, you know, looking into the abyss of what would happen, and then seeing Vice President Harris and really coming to grips with what that would mean. What if it became clear, and I think probably a living, breathing individual, any living, breathing individual might be better for Democrats. I hate to say that, but, you know, it might be. But then again, they are going to be stuck with the realities of what a Vice President Harris is at the top of the ticket. They're going to be stuck with what that would mean. And I'm wondering when they suddenly say, oh, my God, we're getting what we wish for. Are we sure we want this?
I talked to a Harris supporter who talked me through a very specific plan for her to run. So she, of course, was a prosecutor, elected DA in San Francisco, was the attorney general in my native state, California. So they would use a frame of prosecutor versus convict, Harris versus Trump. And she helps the Democratic ticket with young voters. She helps with the women voters who are swing voters. So there is a plan to show her strengths if she goes to the top of the ticket.